Thank you. Okay. We need to let people know that they're being recorded as well, Nicola. Hello. Nicola, will you keep me informed as to many people are in?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just starting to come in here, so sitting on 80.
Well done. And is that you? You've got the presentation up on that because we've just got the Ulster Beekeepers on there.
Is Tom not with? Do you want to share your screen, Tom? And then you can change the slides as you need to.
Sorry, yes, I'll share now then if you want me to.
There you go. I think we've got quite a few people coming in, and I'm Valentine. I know Tom's actually on the screen there at the moment, so I'd like to say hello and welcome to those who are signing in at the moment. I think we're waiting on over 200 people coming in. I think we're halfway there at the moment, and you're very welcome. And thank you for joining us this evening. So Nicola's going to keep us informed when we get to about 200, and she'll keep an eye on who's actually coming in. And you're all very welcome. We have a chat box at the bottom. Everybody at the moment will be muted. If you want to tell us who you are and where you're actually calling from, it's a miserable evening here at the moment. I don't know what it's like where you are, but this has been typically warm, cold, wet weather all summer. So our bees have been stuck in the hives for a few days over the summertime, which means they're going to be pretty congested and possibly picking up bits and pieces of disease from each other. So that's what we're trying to cover this evening. Oh, we've got somebody in chat already. Okay, that was just me saying I can't unmute. In the chat, you'll find that this webinar is actually being recorded. We're hoping to edit it and put it up on YouTube as well so that people can actually view it at a later stage. So if you have any objections to that being recorded, please let us know again in the chat box. Tom, what's it like down in your part of the world? Is it just as bad as here?
I think the forecast was, light rain, but I've seen some of the heaviest showers in a long time today. So there's been a lot more rain today than I expected and thought was coming this way.
It's horrible, but I believe we're going to get better weather over this weekend.
I think there's possibly warm weather and another week of quite good or quite warm weather. Maybe not wall-to-wall sunshine, but at least warm weather. And if it's reasonably dry, those beekeepers searching for the heather or the last of the balsam might still get a few more frames filled.
Yeah, there's a few blooms out there. It all seems a bit late this year. Even the bramble's still in bloom at the moment in our area. So there's a bit out there.
Yeah, there's still a bit of bramble, but I think most of the bramble will have lost any nectar now. If bees are finding anything else, even the meadowsweet and things like that, which don't give much nectar, you can see them they're using it. But
yeah,
but it's I wonder what warm weather can do.
Yeah.
Warm weather can drag out the last bits there and maybe fill a half super or fill a few frames in the brood box ready for the winter and ready for the ivy to come.
Yeah, I think we're hoping to get most of our supers off in the next week or so and get them back on again, because I think the ivy will be full flow, not very distant future down in our area anyway.
Yeah.
Now,
I have a couple of apiaries cleared and just going to start working through them, but the heather and the balsam I'll probably leave for another few weeks at least.
Yeah. Okay, great. How are we doing for numbers, Nicola?
We're on 118. For some reason, the question answers bit won't work, so I'm working on that. So leave that with me.
Okay. Well, if we can't, we can put them into chat. Can we put them in chat? But somebody put their hand up and it came right across the screen. So I don't really want that happening.
Yes, I
We're
think
gonna-
that was Sandra just letting me know that the chat box or the Q&A box isn't properly working. But we've got someone from Croydon with us this evening.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Are we any of the guys from the Irish Beekeepers Association with us yet? There's one question in the question and answer. Oh, a chap called Patrick from Croydon. You're very, very welcome. We put that in as well on the question and answer. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to get started anyway, if I may. Nicola, is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So again, thank you. My name's Valentine, the current chair for the Ulster Beekeepers Association. And it was felt at a last couple of executive meetings that due to the lack of bee inspectors, we sort of need to take some of the responsibilities for ourselves. And I've known Tom for a number of years, and he's always felt that we should be responsible for the health of our own bees and be able to identify diseases. So I thought it was very appropriate at this point that we have a look at that and present maybe some of the things, and most of the things you'll already know. But the presentation will take about 30 minutes this evening. So if you want to tell us where you're from, that's great. It's lovely to hear somebody from Croydon. First of all, a few thank yous. Thank you for Nicola for setting up the webinar, and I know that's been quite a bit of work for you, and thank you for that. I'm hoping that Stephanie Piercy is on the call tonight because she's really helped us put the presentation together, which we will make available to each of the associations and any, who wants it. It would be hard for Nicola to send it out to every single member. So what we're trying to do is get bee health advisors, one or two from each association, that will take responsibility a little bit for these webinars and a few other bits and pieces that I'm going to describe at the end of the presentation. And I'd also really like to thank Tom, who agreed to do this on a personal basis, looking at his journey as a beekeeper. Tom began with his grandfather, who was renowned for his section honey and used bees to pollinate the orchards in Armagh, which I know that Tom does these days, very much so. And he got his first hive from his grandfather at a very young age. He did admit to me that he wasn't very good at that stage. But since then, he's now been beekeeping now for 25 years and expanded his hives and started trading honey under Spring Hill Apiaries and supplies local shops to Armagh. And he previously taught the preliminary beekeeping course. Professionally, Tom has served and is the senior bee inspector for DAERA for over 20 years and is passionate about disease control, and that always comes across for me every time I meet up with him. And it's one of the mainstays for very successful beekeeping. And he enjoys his interest and he's very passionate about it. Tom, I'm going to hand over to you, and thank you for agreeing to do this evening. And I'll hand over. You want to carry on with your presentation? That'd be great.
Okay, thank you, Valentine, for those words of introduction, and thank you this evening for everybody for attending. And also a special thanks to Stephanie from Roe Valley for setting out or giving me a presentation that she had done and has formed the bones of this talk tonight. Now, I'm sharing my screen, so can somebody indicate all's okay? I think it is. Yep. So there we go. Notifiable brood diseases, and specifically, those are the foul brood, American foul brood and European foul brood. So mainly, that's the topic for this evening, and it's going to be aimed at, well, I suppose, beekeepers, old and new, and bee health advisors from within the Ulster Beekeepers Association. Right, I'm just trying to get my screen to change. So an introduction. So what we're going to try and work through this evening is, why is there a concern regarding the brood diseases, and what's sort of happening in brief detail, and what maybe can you consider or take on board in helping to alleviate the issues going forward. I'd like to talk a wee bit about understanding the perspective of the apiary, the hive and the brood. So a wee bit of a wider consideration rather than always just talking about brood and healthy brood. Identifying those brood diseases, and that'll be an important part of this, what does AFB and AFB look like? But before that, what does healthy brood look like and healthy larvae? Overall then, a role for beekeepers, local association, bee health advisors and deer bee inspectors in disease management. And the last are some of the points that I've picked up from especially Stephanie on the action points agreed at the UBK emergency June meeting. So I'll try and introduce some of that, and that'll be no doubt carried forward through the local associations by the UBK and their executive officers. So what are the issues? And I'm going to start with two graphs. And the first one is the disease levels found by DAERA for the last 20 years, actually, because I've actually included 2024 here. And so far this year, we have 3 EFB and 1 AFB recorded or noted on for reported to us. And EFB has become more and more significant. And if you look at that, you will see that EFB has now been recorded at higher levels than AFB for the last 4 years. But and in thinking about this, if you also look at where the inspections have went over this last 4 years or so, basically since COVID, it took a nosedive, and they haven't really got back to levels that allow a full service of inspection to go. And I haven't put up the 2024 because actually they're sitting at single figures, and they're unlikely to get out of single figures this year. So the surveillance and follow-up inspections, which were an important part of disease control and helping to lower the levels, if not remove it from areas that were found to have it, that work has practically ceased since 2019. Now, there is a wee bit of that in the last 3 years that happened, but it was only a small amount of it happening. And that's the picture and one of the representations of the issues of brood diseases and the changes that have happened for a number of reasons, be it COVID or be it a lack of inspector resource. But it doesn't allow, and it isn't really dealing with some of those spikes that we've had. And we've had a spike there in 2023 of 21 cases of EFB, and some of those were quite serious, quite high levels of EFB and apiaries. I want to also show a wee bit of data, not all my own, the NAP Bee Stressor project, which was a project carried out in UCD Dublin, where beekeepers across Ireland were actually asked to send in samples of brood, of honey, and these were, and also live bees now, although that would be for adult bee diseases. But the brood samples sent in 2019 from beekeepers in Northern Ireland are represented here on the left-hand screen. Every dot represents a brood sample that was sent in by a beekeeper. Every red dot represents a sample where they identified the bacterium which causes EFB. Now, at that time, we were dealing with EFB in the Northwest, and we were considering that, we would hopefully contain it there, we would manage it there, and that movement wouldn't occur. But this really showed, even though there wasn't symptoms in these hives, or not considered to be symptoms in these hives, that EFB was obviously in the areas that it was further than the Northwest, and that, my view at that time was sooner or later something is going to show here. And it wasn't really until 2023, and if you look at the second map, where we see that we started to pick this up in, the southern part of the province, and some of those dots, the red dots around the Belfast, Bangor areas, show how and why, that disease was being found in the samples, and the level of infection in those areas is quite close there in real terms, and was being spread by sales and nukes and stuff like that by beekeepers in that area. But there wasn't many samples in the Lisburn Armagh area, there wasn't any sent into the NAP Bee Stressor project. But as you can see, that disease is evident right across that part of the country. So some alarming things, some of it slightly expected by me, because that original data was telling me something that we weren't finding, and beekeepers weren't reporting, that disease was there. And sooner or later, I reckoned it would turn up, and it did last year. How important is disease control, and how important do you consider it? And I know it's not a topic that's not liked, it's not liked in association meetings overly, and I've done many talks on diseases, and many times I feel it's listened to and it's accepted and it's acknowledged that you have to know about it, but beekeepers would rather talk about other things. For me, there's four important things four main things. There's other things too, and you might have changed some of these, or you might have 5 or 6, but there's 4 things that are fairly critical in you getting a good colony of bees to produce a good crop of honey. Now, I use the term a good crop of honey. It doesn't matter if you're producing queens for rearing, or it doesn't matter if you're producing nukes. Basically, the same things are relevant. And the weather is, and I've just put them in the order that I feel beekeepers talk about them. So number 1 is the weather. It is very important as to how your bees do, and the stresses that's caused, and the yields you get, etc., etc. But you can't do anything about it. Probably, thank goodness. But it is an important part of the year, and we talk about it a lot. The second one there, I think, is swarming, and it's a natural thing for bees. It just needs to be managed. But there's no doubt, if you lose a swarm and lose a cast, you're not going to get very much from that colony. If anything, your target is probably to get that colony built up for the winter. It does appear in a lot of our talks. We do spend a lot of time on it, and it is very important. The crucial one, though, that I would bring to the top, if it is me, or the next 2, or the crucial 2, is the queen. The genetics and the viability of the queen play a big role, in my view, in producing a strong box of bees that bring in a strong crop of honey. Now, that will vary on weather, I admit that, but still, there's an importance there that can't be got away from, and is crucial, that if you want to have a good honey crop from your hive or hives. Disease sits there as well, and it's probably the one that we don't really look enough at, or at least I feel. And it doesn't matter whether it's chalk brood or foul brood. Disease levels in your colonies that are too high, or shouldn't be there, whichever it is, are going to have a serious impact on your honey crop. Chalk brood, while we're not honing in on this tonight, to me is just as important in controlling and reducing or maintaining at very low levels to that honey crop. And sometimes I don't buy into the fact of hygienic bees. If they remove the chalk brood, then it's okay. If you notice your colonies not producing, not building up in the spring, and you compare it with your other colonies, or you compare it with a close neighbour who's keeping bees, and you know there's something wrong, those last 2 things, the queen and the disease, are nearly the first 2 things that would have me trying to decide which it is and what is causing the problem, and doing something about it. Now, will it be bee inspectors, will it be bee health advisors, or whether just a beekeeper, beginner, or at this for years, I would also say, before we jump into just what is happening in the cell and what healthy brood is like, don't forget the bigger picture. And there's two areas here, and that's the apiary or the apiaries, if you have obviously more than one. And what you do in those and how you manage those has a big bearing on how healthy your colonies will be. Swarms, that will get mentioned a lot, and how you manage those, how you keep an eye on them. If you can, keep them separate. Obviously, if you've only one apiary, that is not as feasible. And I probably find with most people it's not actually feasible at all. They have one apiary or two apiaries, and the choice is which one. But if you have to bring it into the apiary, keep a close eye on it, and that's not just for 1 week or 2 weeks or 1 month. A minimum of 2 brood cycles. So if it doesn't start laying, the queen doesn't start laying for 3 weeks, it's still at least 2 brood cycles. And I would mark a swarm that came into my apiaries as, I just give it a sort of a name, like, I mean, where I got it maybe, like the Armagh swarm or something. And I would, probably give it more checks over a year than a box that has been separated as a nuke from my own bees. Supers, a difficult one, but can you even keep them separate between each apiary? And that would limit the spread of foul broods if you could. It might help you deal with something if it cropped up quicker and easier. Is the equipment used between apiaries, and can you reduce that? I know, a hive tool, and is it clean, or is your gloves clean? Are you changing gloves? Small things here can help. The closeness to other apiaries, there's not a lot you can do about it, but it's to be aware of it. How does the beekeepers that are around about you, do you have a good relationship with them and know that they'll, for instance, close up dead outs, that you will do that as well? And try to prevent the spread of disease. Hive movements, this is a part of, a natural part of beekeeping, whether you're going for pollination or whether you're going for other crops, but those will increase your risks, both either by bringing stuff or disease to other areas, or by picking up disease and bringing it back to your apiary. Multiple beekeepers, and many beekeepers work in pairs or small groups or associations, but just be careful that the more people bringing in and moving equipment, moving swarms, moving bees, the risks will increase. And over the years, quite often I've seen where there's multiple beekeepers connected in the apiary, and quite often they have come up with disease in that apiary. Very important are dead outs closed up. Bees will rob happily in February, probably more so than they will in the July flow. And if you have bees that have died out over the winter and they're not closed up, there will be a fair degree of robbing have occurred over the winter. And that is one way to spread disease both to your other bees and to your neighbours' bees. The hive, getting down to the smaller unit, do you regularly move frames between hives just because one of them is weaker and you want to build it up? Do you actually check why is it weaker before doing that? I know there's plenty of management reasons for doing it, especially the term you've heard of it, that using the test frame. It's very useful, but can you limit it, and can you check that you're moving healthy brood frames when you're doing this? If you have small numbers of hives, can you keep separate supers? I find this probably out of the mold very difficult. Some people achieve it, but if you have only a small number of hives and you want to take the ultimate steps, then possibly consider keeping the supers for a particular hive year after year. Do you notice the spring build-up of a colony? Do you start looking as soon as you see that it's not building up as strong as the rest? And that's back to my previous slide, is it the queen? Is it disease? Likewise, the honey yield also triggers to me, is there something wrong with the colony when it only has sitting with half a super and the rest are in the third super? What is wrong? Or I should know at that stage. I'm looking at that stage. I want to know at that stage. And I will mark my record card, there's a queen who's poor, and that queen, some sort of indication as to when to requeen her. Or if it's chalk brood, maybe even move in sooner. Equipment, feeders and queen excluders. Something actually I'm going to try this year is just leave the queen excluders on the hives, on the top of the hives, and not move them between apiaries and hives if I can. I'm going to try that. Feeders, do you put the plastic feeders into bleach solution for a couple of hours? It's a wonder how that just cleans the propolis and everything out of them, or they just get a rough scrape and set into the bee house or whatever shed you keep them in and put out again whenever they're needed. Food levels in a hive, when you're considering it, like if a colony is stressing with food, things like EFB might become more prevalent, because obviously that's a food issue type disease. Brood present, that can also present problems if you're trying to work out what the disease is. If there's no brood there, you can't really make much of a conclusion on EFB. On the other hand of that, though, I've always found that when you go into, for instance, the August time and brood is the laying is stopped by the queen, if you see cells not emerging, not hatching, or well, emerging is the correct word there, question those, take the caplins off a few of them. Are they chalk brood, or even worse, are they American foul brood? And quite often, in inspections at this time of year, those cells are quite easily identified because they're sitting out in a frame or two from the brood, and you can see them, you can check them. So sometimes the food and the brood present can help with looking for disease, and sometimes they can prevent you making a full conclusion of what's going on. Now, most of you probably know the two foul broods, American foul brood and European foul brood. They're found right throughout the world, and they're not limited to or overly connected to America or Europe just because of the names. They're both bacteria, bacteria forming, bacteria causing ageisms, but the difference in them is one of them is spore forming. American foul brood has this capacity to produce spores and have a longer shelf life, if you want to put it that way, on your equipment. And that is how it is spread. Those spores are fed by the nurse bees to the young larvae, and they will germinate and reproduce. It's very if this is fed to larvae, young larvae, it only takes small amounts of it, and they talk about 10 or 12 spores to initiate the eventual death of that larvae and the multiplication of that disease in that larvae. It's only found after, or mostly only found after sealing. And very often I would say, American foul brood A for after, so it's after the cell is sealed. Spores are highly resistant to normal methods of killing bacteria. Your really only option here is, heat on the blue flame of a blowtorch, and that's why you would use that method to, clean up contaminated equipment like the hive box or the brood box, etc. Similarly, for European foul brood, it's fed to the nurse bees, but its differences here is that it basically remains in the gut and competes for the food that the larvae wants. It's causing it to starve by actually taking all the food from it. So you'd have picked up earlier, we talked about, how much food was about in the colony, or was there a dearth on, or was there a flow on. That can have effect on how easier, or it is seen and identified in a hive. The death usually occurs before the cell is sealed. You know, we talk about EFB, sometimes we say early, it's before it's sealed, and that's usually the beginners. We talk about the two ways of trying to identify. So two very important things there to be aware of. You know, one's before sealing and one is after sealing. The bacteria don't invade the body tissues the way American foulbrood does, but EFB is very insidious. Yes, it can be exacerbated by other stresses, whether it be food or varroa infestation or even chalk brood levels, I believe. But it will go unnoticed and is just as serious in the destruction of the colony and the spiraling down of the strength of your colony, and then therefore the ability to bring in honey and increase in size and produce a honey yield. Especially for beginners, but really anyone, if this would be the most important slide tonight, is knowing what healthy larvae look like. Because once you establish that, you can then say there's something not right here. And I've seen that a lot of times from beginners, and you know, been impressed with where they've bought bees and they've just known there's something not right. They can't tell me, you know, what it is. They can't tell their association what it is. They can't tell the person they bought it off what it is, but they're attempting to say there's something not right and I don't like it. So if you can pick up what healthy larvae look like and have that focused, at least you've taken the most important step in dealing with disease levels in your colonies. A healthy brood pattern has very few empty cells. It's also an indication of a good laying queen, etc. But it is one of the indications that, and there's a lot of diseases that will give you empty cells or a pepper pot brood pattern. But the larvae themselves are mostly, you would call them C-shaped. You can see the segmentation, and there's a glisten or a pearly white of them. That's basically it. If you look at the larvae, go towards the older larvae, those that are about to be sealed, those that are filling the cells. Don't be looking at the eggs and how good the queen's laying at this stage. If you're looking for what is healthy in your colony, look at those older larvae and see, is that what you see in them all? And when you see one that isn't, then you should be having a look at and making some sort of an opinion or finding out what is wrong with it. The capons are also important, and because American foulbrood is after capon, the signs really do come from the capons for it. Now there will be, as usual, there will be the pepper pot, but the capons, you want them to be uniform in color. Now normally we would talk about you know, a brown or a brown tan, and a good convex appearance. Now the color I don't find as just as clear cut as that. You know, that photograph there of the brood, I took that when I was training to be a bee inspector in England, and that's over 20 years ago. And I've used that photograph many times. It's very light. They're not brown or tan really, but a fresh flow, possibly something like bramble, will give you a light colored cappings. The opposite of that is if you're using wax for as long as I have been a bee inspector, you will have black combs and you will most likely have a sort of a black capping, you know, a dark brown capping. It's the uniformity, though, is one of the important things, and a pepper pot appearance of sunken and darkened cells is what the worry would be. The disease process of American foulbrood. The larvae, as we said, are infected by contaminated brood food and fed to the young larvae by the nurse bees at a very young age. And if that happens, it doesn't take very much of those to infect that larvae and for those spores to start germinating and multiplying in the gut to the level that they spread through the body and end up killing that larvae. There's many millions of spores produced in each cell, probably enough to spread them out. If you're feeding 12 to every cell, you know, you could infect millions and millions of colonies. Eventually, those larvae dry out and they will stick to the cell wall, and they can be, well, they're in a sense they're difficult to remove, or they're impossible to remove. You have to pull the cell wall off if you want to take them out, really. That's how well they're stuck to it. Probably considered more virulent than the EFB. The larvae, if they're infected at that level, they will die. And yes, the colony becomes unable to replace the bee population and will collapse. It'll probably collapse because of secondary things, whether that be not able to provide food, or won't last through the winter, or Varroa or other things pushing it on its way out. But it will have you know, a termination of your colony and spread to other colonies if left that long. When you're checking for AFB, you need to move the frames from the, or sorry, you need to move the bees from the frames. You need to be able to see what is there in all the cells and in all the cappings, because this does start with 1 or 2 cells. And when as a beekeeper has complained to the inspector or complained to me about us wanting to destroy a colony with only 1 cell or 2 cells infected with AFB. Watch for the potchy, the uneven pepper pot that I've mentioned before. When you do get the bees off, you know, it can be other diseases, and it can be a failing queen. And if you consider you've got good sense of smell and you can smell something that isn't normal, it probably means you've got secondary infections, and you probably have quite a severe conditions of, you know, of AFB here. You look at the cappings, are they darkened? Are they sunken? And not so clear, but a sort of a greasy appearance or wet appearance. And some of them most likely will have perforations. Small holes, not at the center, but more to around towards the edges. Remember that as bees are capping, they're capping towards the center, and there could still be a hole there where they just haven't finished capping. Remove some of those cappings and check the cell contents. You might notice it, or you know, you should be able to see it before you put a matchstick in, the sort of the brown discolored glob of the larvae that's sitting in there. Use a matchstick test to perform the ropiness test. The bottom left picture there just shows you the gunge or the glue type material coming out of the cell after it's been stored by a match. If you do get that, I wouldn't actually do much more inspection. I would be inclined to get this tested or get this confirmed. That's one of the tests that is almost foolproof. If you can bring that brown gunge out about an inch out of the cell, that's one of the symptoms that is a field test that is just almost perfect if you find that. But run an AFB file root test kit, or get the contents into a vial for lab diagnosis. You can look for AFB scales, and they'll remain dried and glued to the bottom wall of the cell. Quite difficult to see, and black combs even more difficult. But that you know, most likely you're going to be finding this by finding larvae that are brown gunge and going to test them with a matchstick. When you do get to this stage, change the PPE and clean your equipment before going to other hives. Yes, you've probably inspected hives routinely, you know, prior to this, but now if you're establishing that there's something like this wrong, change what you're doing and stop for a minute and get this sorted out and change your PPE. Don't continue to spread it or take the risk of spreading it. Don't move hives as well till you've established just how bad or what is going on here and got the cleanup done and informed DAERA. that's a legal requirement to notify a suspicion of foul brood in your hives. If it's confirmed, the colony and the hive contents will need to be destroyed and the hive equipment cleaned up. And that's not just tools and things like that. Even the extractor, for instance, would need to be cleaned down, and not the possibility of frames going in there and come in contact with maybe contaminated honey. If it's suspected, you're really then needing support. You're maybe not so sure. You're whatever the reason. There's a number of things, but you need to reach out to somebody, the bee health advisor, if you know who that is within your association, if there is one, and request a free sample kit or inform the deer of being inspected. But you need to get something in progress here to try and get a sample checked and either confirmed positive or negative. Also, watch for other information, especially the UBK sample collection and it'll be a video on that, and that'll be available for you to show you how to take samples, both probably, I presume, for a comb and then eventually for bees. Moving on to EFB, we have a couple of drawouts here for healthy larvae. An example of B, C, and D, the red dots where the bacteria are multiplying in the gut. And essentially, as I said, they're competing with the food, and the larvae dies of starvation. It'll begin to turn color. The pearly white will disappear, and a yellow color and deeper into brown will appear, and the segmentation will go, and there will be a twist to the larvae in the cell. And you will see those things, and those are the things that you will look for when you're looking at your mature larvae in the cell. The remains decompose and dry out. They do turn a browner color, but they do not stick to the cell wall, and bees will remove them. So you may well look and see very little or see nothing, or even put it down to other things, that there's some chalk brood or there's some sac brood quite regularly mixed up, or the first things that come to beekeepers' minds. I did say it is an insidious disease. It is. If the larvae do survive, that the infection hasn't been that strong, that the feeding to the larvae has managed for it to survive, it can void its gut and leave millions of infectious bacteria in the cell. Again, if you're checking for EFB, shake the frames so that you can see the brood. Also, it's patchy, uneven pepper pot is one of the first indications that there's something wrong with the brood pattern here. I would also say a secondary infection will cause the smell and not the EFB. So it usually indicates that there is a fair degree of and a high level of infection here. Examine the unsealed brood. If it's discolored, if it's twisted, if it's lying unnaturally in the cell, if it has that melted appearance and lost the segmentation, those are all indications that there's something wrong. It won't rope, it'll be hard to get it even a centimeter to come out, but it will possibly up to that, but it'll not come out brown and long up to an inch like the EFB. But those things, you will mix them up, or you will think that there's chalk brood, that there is sac brood, and there is some similarities to what you see in this hive. And don't be quick to jump into saying that it is chalk brood, that it is sac brood. Keep an eye on, if you can find something that matches those descriptions, run the foul brood test kit and get the vial and fill it for the lab. If you're suspicious, the same thing, change the PPE and change your equipment. And I have a word not amended properly there in that line, but obviously before checking another hive if EFB is suspected. Don't move hives and inform DAERA. Don't move hives to spread it until you've got on top of it and you know what's wrong and got the thing under control, but inform DAERA that you suspect you have EFB. If it's confirmed, the colony and hive contents will need to be considered for destruction, possibly should swarmed and the hive and then the equipment cleaned up. Now, I'm not going to go in too much into the whys and wherefores of between destruction and should swarm, but should swarm doesn't always work. And how quickly and how certain do you want to be about cleaning this up? You may well, and many beekeepers do, step straight to destruction with the aim to get rid of this as quickly and as simply as possible. If the EFB is suspected, again, contact the Bee Health Advisor from your association and request a free sample kit so that you can get a sample off to the lab and inform the DAERA bee inspector. If you do have suspicions or find a disease, there is a cleanup process. And this slide, I've amended it slightly from what Stephanie had. But first of all, you as a beekeeper notice symptoms. There's something not right. There's something you're not happy about. And your first step, if you're experienced and know what you're thinking here, this isn't right and it's like AFB or AFB, you would inform the bee inspector. If you take photographs, try to get these in focus and try to focus on the cells that are abnormal. There's no point in having bees and there's no point in having healthy cells. Try to focus on what is wrong. And sometimes we can tell a lot, we can tell, no, this isn't anything to worry about, or, you need to take further steps for that. Don't move bees, frames, honey, or equipment between apiaries and hives until you get the full picture of what's happening here. And as I said before, disinfect all the bee equipment and the PPE that you've been using at that point in time. Now, you can either get a sample tested by an inspector using an LFD and possibly even using LFD yourself. If the test shows positive, my theory on this is there is no point in going any further with sampling. You've got a confirmation of what's wrong and you have to start the control measures. If you have on the other hand sent a sample off or a vial, as per the guidance from what you received from the UBK, again, don't move bees and equipment until you've established what is happening here and what you are facing. Reduce the colony entrance to, and I know it says here a bee space, and if this is a large colony, that might not be relevant, but what you're wanting to make sure is that limit the robbing as possible. So if it's a weakened small colony, you need to go down to a bee space to try to prevent anything else being taken out of that colony and spreading disease. If disease is confirmed, the beekeeper will carry out the disease control measures, and those are slightly different, and depending on what happens, especially with the EFB. The frames must be destroyed, and if it is shook swarm, then obviously you're saving the bees and shaking them onto new combs. AFB infected colonies, the contents of the hive have to be destroyed. The cleanup, poly or plastic equipment is always a bit difficult. Scraping and getting it clean doesn't always go well with the poly hives, and you can do a lot of damage. But you need to try and get the rough off them and then move into basically a bleach solution. Now, I would, while in NVU and different things say 20 minutes, I would be inclined to go further, because if you put in a bleach solution, you will clean up your equipment quite well. If it's a couple of hours or maybe overnight, it will break down the propolis and leave you a reasonably clean hive afterwards. Wooden hives, you have to torch them and heat those parts of the hive that are with the blowtorch to the point where you're going to kill a very high percentage of the spores. Now, if that wooden hive is in poor condition, think seriously about just burning it with the rest of the contents. One of our disease inspections was follow-up, and it's important to follow up. Give it a bit of time. I mean, our first follow-up inspection would have been, in the region of 6 to 8 weeks later. It gives time for more, a few more cycles of brood, and it lets you get another picture of what is actually happening in your colonies. We also would have followed up in 1 year and 3 years, and I think that's the sort of period that you need to be watching for these diseases. You may bring out a super that you didn't know was in contact with something. It just may have been in the shed. You may have forgotten about where it was, or you may have a stack of supers that were never used, and you may bring them out and spread AFB again. So you need to continuously watch that, and I suspect 3 years is a reasonable period of time to have to consider that. Sample collection, and this is where you as the beekeeper probably have to be more active if there's not an inspector available to come out and check the hive. Now, you do need some equipment here, and like boxes or vials and things like that, and those sort of things are going to be put together by UBKA, and as I understand it, Valentine will give more details at the end of this talk on that. But absorbent paper and a rigid cardboard box and the cutting tool to cut out a sample for the lab. Cut out a 10 by 10 piece of comb, that's sort of a minimum size. But the important thing here is to make sure you are focusing on material that isn't healthy. That's what you want to get to the lab. Do not include honey in this, because it will run and it will make a mess, and it'll make it difficult or maybe impossible for the labs to run tests on it. If it's comb, obviously you ensure that the queen isn't there, but no bees at all. Wrap the comb in absorbent paper or very light cloth. Do not use plastic or airtight containers with this, because it'll sweat, and a bit like the honey will cause problems and make it hard for the labs to test, especially if it gets into growing fungi or something like that. Place the wrap comb in a rigid cardboard box so that you don't crush the comb. So again, that those cells that you're trying to get the lab technician to take out and test are easily seen, and clean up your equipment afterwards. Send to AFB. Essentially here you probably would be indicating as the open cells or the closed cells. The more information you give, the quicker and the simpler someone will go to that and try and pick it out. But they will test, if you send in comb, they'll test for AFB and EFB, no matter what you're asking for them. So, and the other way of if you're feeling confident enough and can identify larvae and have tweezers and a vial, you can use a vial to take out the larvae and put 3 or 4 of them in it with a pair of tweezers and send that into the lab. Now you really need to be lifting infected larvae and possibly something in that region of 3 or 4 into that wee vial and posting that off. The last thing you need to be mindful of, you don't want this sample sitting around in the post office or at reception of a lab. So you want to do this early in the week and try and have it away in the post by Wednesday, or else leave it to later in the week, lift it to the weekend and post it first thing on Monday. Or if you're near the lab, you can actually drive down and leave it into the reception. So how do we reduce the risk? Well, these are a list of things that we've probably heard over and over again. But avoid buying old equipment. Never, never, ever bring frames into your apiaries or honey house or shed that are from other people. Buy the equipment if you have to and scorch it and clean it up, but just never bring comb and frames in. It's not worth it. Slightly I have a wee bit of trouble if avoid buying from unknown sources, because that really limits you down to the small number or your association. But yes, try and see if you can pick up the bees from that area. It doesn't actually say that it will be free of disease, but avoid just, there's something on Gumtree and driving 200 miles and buying bees. I've come across it, and they've moved in those sorts of distances, and a year later we're destroying them, forgetting about probably the suspected movement as well. Shouldn't have occurred those distances. But try and do something local, working with local beekeepers. And I know it'll not always work, and you can just pick up disease the same. If you're a beginner, ask somebody though that if you are in contact with about bees, look, I'm not too sure about bees, but I would like to bring an experienced beekeeper with me to have a look at the bees. Is that all right? If it's not all right, there's an alarm bell straight away. Don't move frames of honey or brood between hives and apiaries. And I know there's difficulties there. If you've only got one hive, you're even going to have to go to a friend to get a test frame. But try to limit doing that. There's no need to allow beekeepers into your apiaries with their hive tools. Clean suit, and that's enough for them. Provide them with a hive tool if they're going to help you or show you or something like that. Minimize robbing, drifting, or leaving wet supers out. And if there's infection, those are all ways of potentially spreading infection. And the number of times I see posts on Facebook where somebody has left out the cappings. Of course, the bees will clean it up so clean that you could put your hand in it, you won't feel honey on it. But if it's infected with bacteria, you've just spread it. Not only to your own bees, but probably bees within a mile radius, if not more. Use soda crystal solutions in a bucket to dip your hive in, or not dip it in, to leave it in, between hives and between the apiaries, etc. It's excellent for cleaning down the propolis, and a wee wire brush for scrubbing it off. That should be standard practice. Try and get into the way of it. Just that you always have a bucket with soda crystals in it, and your hive tool just lives in it, and you take it out when you need it. And then you change that soda crystal quite often. Clean suit and moist gloves. I would go to disposable gloves, but if you have to have thick gloves, have something that can be washed, or else put a disposable or a washable glove over those thick gloves. Replace comb every 3 to 5 years. I don't know how I could do that if I didn't put the year on it. I do find it difficult to get them out every 4 years, because just whatever way and time, the end of the year doesn't work. But I mark the year on the frames with the idea of replacing combs. If you're sitting with brood frames for 20 years, do yourself a favor and go out and buy some new combs and give it to a colony next year, and just see how the queen loves to lay in those, and colony just responds to new comb. Just let her, bees are naturally made to produce wax, and let her have a go at it, just for your own satisfaction. Periodically, inspect your boxes for disease. I'll usually say twice a year, but when you see something isn't building up, when something isn't producing the same yield from the flow that's the other hives is doing, find out what's wrong. It might just be the Queen, and you just mark your record card that you need to think about getting a new Queen and putting a Queen cell into that later on in the year or something. Quarantine swarms as best as you can and inspect of them. Not once, not twice, but I would constantly watch its swarms for a year, even longer. Close up the entrances to your dead outs. I mean, you might think that you close up your bees in October and not come back to March. There'll be a lot of robins went on if you have dead colonies in that time. You need to look at them a bit more often than that and close those dead outs. The action points from UBK. I'm just going to go down and have a wee check to see if I can see what time it is. And my time is about up, isn't it?
Yes, Tom, we're nearly there. Thank you.
I'm just really see what I'm actually long past the time whenever I go down.
Yeah.
Oh, way. So some of the action points, for bee health advisors, associations, and the resources and the policy. Hopefully the UBK are going to appoint 1 or 2 bee health advisors from each association, and their big groups and support, and sample kits provided to them to work with you as the beekeeper from whatever association you're in. Associations are going to be encouraged to run, bee disease events annually, demonstrating sample taking, and encourage members to report to their association or to the bee inspectors their suspicions or findings of fouls, even a course on WhatsApp groups to support them. Develop YouTube videos for sample taking and support through Zoom, things like that, to help those that are stepping up to those roles of bee health advisors. Policy, still working with from administrative level and the government level to push the need and the point for bee inspectors. I'm going to miss out what does a bee health advisor do, because I probably have indicated a fair bit, but briefly to say that they are there to support you, the beekeeper, and help and guide you, and do it on a if you want it basis type thing. It's not that they are anyway an inspector or anyway an officer of the government. They're there to work with you and help you when you have a problem and when you come with them to seek that support and help. Contacts in Northern Ireland and ROI. You have the laboratories in Efords, and if you're from ROI, you have your Dr. Mary Coffey in the laboratories down in Black Weston to send samples in. Use them, they don't cost anything, and if you're not sure and you don't have an LFD kit, get a sample into them as quickly as you can. So, free testing, make use of it. It's there. Apiary hygiene, the better you look at the apiary and not just at the hive and consider the apiary and the hives in it, to keep and protect them, the better, and better for you in the long run. And hopefully it means that you won't pick up either of the foul roots. If you're a new beginner, or if you're at it for many years, always educate yourself about brood diseases. Stay in touch with the bee health advisors, and they will have WhatsApp groups, but just be aware of the internet advice overall. Some of it's good, but some of it's just a wee bit off the wall. And remember that if you suspect you have disease, you need to report it to DAERA. Last slide, and I'm not going through it. I wasn't intending to go through this, but just I've said now for a year, if you look at last year's findings of over 70 nests in GB, mostly probably caused by traffic, but possibly some blow-in because of the closeness, but probably mostly traffic. I think Ireland is probably due, statistics-wise or percentage-wise, whatever it is probably due its own Asian hornet nest. Hopefully not, but from now on you'll be talking about wasps. Spend a second or two and just educate yourself, and also watch out for Asian hornets, especially if you're near ports or those main roads coming out of ports. Folks, thank you for your attention. Sorry I've run over a wee bit here. I've ad-libbed too much maybe in my slides, but I apologize for that. But I'll hand back to Valentine as the chair.
Amazing. I've already got clapping hands coming up. I've even learned a couple of things in there. I've got lots of questions in Q&A. If I could run through them, I'm going to try. Some of them are in chat, some of them are in Q&A. Add the Q&A if you want. Now I'm going to stick and try and do EFB to start with, Tom, if I may. And there was one came in very early on, and that was EFB. When you say death occurs before the cell is sealed, does the cell remain unsealed, or do the bees continue on and seal it?
Normally it's not sealed. I wouldn't just like to say definitely where you have a very, very low infection of that larvae, where it does actually survive and you do have it sealed. As I said, they can survive in, you know, where it's not too high infection, and they can produce a lot of bacteria in the cell whenever they void their contents to emerge. It's mostly death before sealing. The opposite also occurs for AFB. There's sometimes deaths before sealing as well for AFB, but that's very rare as well. Brilliant.
Okay, yes. And the bees sometimes clean them out, which makes it more difficult sometimes to identify, Tom, isn't that right?
That's builds into this insidious nature of EFB. It's cleared out and you don't see it.
Okay. There's another question about EFB. Is there any correlation between wild bees carrying EFB and apiaries bees? Is there any correlation between them?
I'm not aware of it. Like, I mean, it occurs in wild bees, both AFB and EFB, and those that are involved in taking bees out of cavities and trees and chimneys, etc., sometimes find that the colony is infected. Just the same, that can be a source for EFB or AFB in your area, and it is very hard to deal with. It's one of the issues where probably an inspector will fail because they can't do anything about it.
Okay. Yeah. There's another one. Could you have AFB and EFB in the same hive?
Yes, and while it's rare, I have identified the both in one hive.
Okay. Yeah, so both can occur when they're weak. You know, they're going to get robbed and maybe more disease added to that as well. I'm going to move to AFB. I've been asked if AFB is confirmed in a colony and it has to be destroyed, can the honey be harvested before destruction, or does it need to be destroyed as well?
That's a good question and a difficult one. Remember that the honey will have AFB spores, and you may already actually have the honey off the hive, or you may well find out that there's something wrong when you have a super on the hive. I do understand that sometimes the bee inspectors in England do allow the honey to be harvested if they're content with the beekeeper that there's going to be no risk of it being moved, and they're going to use it and they're going to keep it, you know, for themselves. I also accept that AFB is going to be in honey traded, especially internationally trading of honey. There's going to be AFB in it. If we also look at the project done by UC Dublin, that did include honey, and the honey samples did show AFB and EFB at surprisingly low amounts. There's quite low amounts. If the infection was high, I would usually start out, look, bees, I think here needs to go. But then you're starting to get into discussions of talking about AFB or EFB. You know, you could insist that you want to, or well, you could ask for shook swarm, and that would be considered. And the last thing probably for the honey is, could you keep the honey? And again, that would have to be up to the inspector and what you understand about the risks and how you're going to mitigate against those risks.
I know that I had a discussion with Jack Sillibard about shook swarms because he mentioned them quite a lot when we was over talking about notifiable diseases and EFB in particular, because he's identified a lot. And he has found it's very ineffective. And in fact, he's gone back and done future inspections to find it's been reinfected. And 90% of the time, if not more, he's ended up having to tell them you've got to destroy them because you're just getting reinfection after reinfection. And we've sort of made it, you know, let's get it cleaned up. And it's the UBKA thing. We want it cleaned up. We want it cleaned up properly first time around rather than going round and round in circles. So, you know, I would say for me, if I found it in a hive, I'd want that hive to be cleaned out so that I'm not reinfecting or I'm not going to lose the whole apiary. And, you know, that's what even Jack said, the hands up, more than enough. It's the same apiaries we're going back to because we've done shook swarm after shook swarm and it's not getting cleared up. So
there's many strains of EFB,
and
some of them are more virulent than others. But at the point that you're dealing with EFB, even if you had a system of testing it, you couldn't tell within a few days that it is a very virulent strain of EFB or it's not. So you don't have that information to know how effective the shook swarm is going to be, because that is one of the issues, as I understand it, where EFB does actually fall down to where it's actually not very effective.
Yeah.
We have shown it ourselves in Northern Ireland that it hasn't worked at times. And sometimes this isn't readily accepted by beekeepers whenever you say, look, we're not doing this again. But usually if you've done it and you've found it isn't working, then you're definitely at a point where you have to destroy. It's not working, it's not likely to work, and you're only going to hold it with the potential to spread it.
Yeah, I agree.
I do know that there's a high percentage of beekeepers now do just move to destroying that colony. And that is probably the best, because the level of follow-up inspections that you need to do and watching that are quite high. And your actual worry from when you destroy one colony is actually how much infection is in the rest. So you're probably best to get rid of it and concentrate on the remaining colonies. And if the infection was high, you would have inspectors in England actually saying you should shook swarm the rest of the colonies. In other words, shook swarm the healthy colonies and destroy the unhealthy.
Yeah.
Some of it is up to the beekeeper, I understand that, but those are some of the things that people will, you know, that are working in this professionally, that's what they will say in dealing with EFB.
Okay, from Anne-Marie, would you destroy the honey from an AFB colony if the honey is not going to be fed to the bees? I think we've sort of already answered that.
It shouldn't be fed to the bees. You know, she shouldn't feed honey at all to bees, if I understand.
No. If the honey's not going to be fed to the bees, isn't it safe? Isn't it safe for human consumption? Some say AFB spores are in lots of honey, and I think we've answered that, Tom, anyway.
Yeah.
How long does soda crystal solution stay effective once made up?
I would change that question to you know, how dirty is it getting? You know, if you can't sort of see the hive tool in the bottom of it. Now, I know it is cloudy when you make it up, and if you make it up good and strong, but it's not a case of it just been there all year. I mean, and I know out of for a lot of bees or for a lot of apiaries, I would be making it up quite regularly. But even if you've just a few hives in one apiary, you know, just don't keep it for months and months.
I also think you need to use those wire scrubbies so that
Yeah,
getting
throw
the
it,
bubbles off there as well.
yeah,
So
throw it into the bucket along with it. It's a wire wool scrubby or whatever you call it, in the bucket as well, because once it's seeped in the crystal, the soda solution, it washes off a lot easier. If you just try to rub it off with hands and water, you just spread it, but the soda solution breaks it down.
okay, another one. What should you use to clean out the extractor? Bleach will damage the stainless steel coating.
What you're trying to achieve here is that you're not going to contaminate frames that you're putting into the extractor. So what you just need to do is give it a good wash out. You can start off and have some, honey will move out with water. And, if you want to add a washing solution to that, that's fine. But water, and I usually go cold water in my extractor anyway, because you don't want to soften up any of these spots of propolis.
Yeah.
But water is just going, 2 or 3 rinses of water will remove all that honey. And what you're trying to achieve here is not allow honey that may be infected back onto frames.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, UBK. This is from Patrick. I was under the impression that anything detected with AFB means that your equipment must be burnt, including brood boxes and supers, not just torched.
I did cover this in that I said if your brood equipment was in poor condition, in other words, there's cracks and gaps and holes and loose joints where you can't really scorch into them. And reality is actually it's in its last legs anyway, born that. But a brand new box or good quality box, if it's even brand new, it's just if it's good quality, sound, it can be scraped down and it can be blow torched. Now, I understand you will not remove 100% of spores, but you're not. That doesn't mean to say you're going to carry the disease over. You're going to bring the spore level down so low that the infection won't reoccur.
Okay.
I haven't, come across where it has reoccurred. The big issue in controls is actually the shoot swarm and the AFB. That's the one that does reoccur.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let me see. Does DEFRA, Scottish Executive or the Welsh Government Department compensate beekeepers for the loss of colonies infected with the AFB? No, they don't, is the answer. Nobody does.
I don't understand anybody does. Yeah, I'm not.
There is an insurance that you can get in England, I believe, which will compensate you for frames and bees, but nothing else. But it is possible to get that, but it's only then possible to get the insurance if a qualified and bee inspector gives you a certificate to say you have cleaned up your apiary. So my answer is no, not Scottish, not the Welsh, and definitely not here, because we don't.
It's an insurance. It's bee diseases insurance.
Bee disease insurance. And I have talked to them.
It's available to beekeepers in GB, but
not everywhere.
The control has to be done through an inspector, and the inspector will state on the strength of your colony. He'll say he will record, or he or she will record the number of frames of brood, and the number of the age and the condition of that brood and foundation, and your payment will be based on that report.
On how old that frame is and such that goes into it as well. But it is there if it is possible to get bee inspectors. We'll have a chat about that in a moment. Last question I'm going to say, because we haven't got that many, which is good, because you've covered everything. It might be a strange question, but does EFB and AFB affect the wax? And if so, how do we manage that given people sell their wax? And I think that is Sonia asking, whenever we sell wax to the foundation producers, but they process it, don't they?
Yeah. The only issue here that really has a question is actually the spores, because they can survive a bit more torture than the bacteria. So if you count the heating of the wax, I think the EFB isn't the question, but it is the spores. I've never, seen how or what is happening. And I process my own wax and melt it down through a special machine, steamer to do it and that. And it is damn hot, so I don't know if it would kill if there was AFB spores in it. Where I get my assurances from is like there's a 2,500 million spores is possible in one cell. So if the wax from an infected colony went into thorns, and I'm nothing against thorns, just one of the people that take the wax at the conference, and that was mixed in with all the wax. There's enough wax spores in there to come out and infect all the beekeepers in UK and Ireland. So something must be occurring there that is clearing that up. I'm not into the science of it, and I'm not involved in what their processes is. But it's generally accepted it's either knocked on the head or locked into the wax, which I've heard that quoted that it's locked into the wax. I don't accept that because I have too many bees that chew the wax and heat holes in it, so I don't accept that. It must be knocked out. I mean, I recommend you wax regularly into a hive. Yes, if you're doing it yourself, I would actually be more worried than possibly, coming from thorns. But I suspect the heating process to melt it down must do something to it, but it's definitely not at the levels of the blue flame. So I can't go any further with that. I haven't the knowledge to answer that fully.
Yeah. But it is good to have. I like to get the premium wax if we can. Tom, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to follow on this with the sample taking and show people what the samples we're going to send out to the bee health advisors. We changed the name from officers because people felt that we were asking associations to have their own bee inspectors. There is no way we can replace bee inspectors. Absolutely not. These are advisors, because what I'm finding is there's a lot of WhatsApps going on out there, and a lot of people are picking up bits and pieces of information from what they think is experts, and there's a lot of nonsense out there. And this is one of the reasons for having this presentation tonight. And thank you again, Tom. You've been speaking to people from all over Ireland, England, and France. So you've got a wide audience there, and I think it was really, really good, and I really appreciate that. Tom only got authority to actually have this presentation today, last night, I believe. So thank you for doing that. And again, thank you to Stephanie from Roe Valley to helping us with the presentation. It's been really, really good. We do not want to replace bee inspectors. We are lobbying to have our bee inspectors back. We want more. I've had another letter back from the department, and we are sending another letter to him and to the minister in the morning, asking for another urgent meeting. This is the time of year we should be doing our own inspections and finding out if there is a possibility of diseases. We're taking off the honey, and we should be trying to do that before the winter. I know Tom is very kindly doing another presentation on Saturday at Dromore about bee improvement, and I know that's going to be about disease again. And I really appreciate your experience, and you've always been there for me, and I really thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Sorry, thank you again. There's lots of clapping, and I don't know if you've seen all the bubbles going up. It's really, really good, and I really, really do appreciate it. Before everybody goes, this is for the UBKA, and obviously we've got people from Ireland, and we're very lucky that we have had our bee inspectors, and we definitely do not want to lose them. So there's still a big process going on there. Believe me, I am lobbying hard, and I know I've got a team that's been doing that with me for the last couple of years, and we're not going to stop. We're going to keep going. In the meantime, we want to take responsibility. Nicola, would you mind putting up the wee short presentation that I had?
Yeah.
Did I send it to you?
You did, 2 seconds.
Thanks, love. So what we're going to do, and what we've decided to do, is because there's 16 associations, And we just wanted somebody with expertise, experience of dealing with bee diseases that you can trust as a member of your association, because we have over 1,400 members. It's very hard to get round to everybody. And I felt there's lots of WhatsApps going on with people who've maybe just in their first year, and they're giving advice to people who've been keeping bees for 3 or 4 years. You got to know where to get your right advice from. And that's why we're looking for people with experience and people who will just help. We are not asking you or not telling you to go to other apiaries to do their inspections for them. We just want you to be there and to be a liaison with us. So what we're going to do is actually send out, and we've agreed to do this at the executive, a pack. Will you be able to change the next screen for me? Or can I do it? Does she be-
There we go.
There you go. So these are the little cardboard boxes. So they're not plastic. They're postal boxes. This is the size that we've got. It's 112 millimeters by 163 millimeters by 20 millimeters. As big a piece of comb, and it's probably brood comb with what you think are unhealthy larvae in that. Put that into the box. Make sure you label the inside of the box, that they know where it's come from, and your name and your telephone number inside that box. Okay, so that the labs can come back to you. And what we said in there, it's for brood comb. So you can actually, we're going to send you the address to send it to as well. Send those samples off to the laboratory Monday to Wednesday. If you take that, most people do their inspections on a Saturday and you're really worried about them, you're going to have to put them securely in the fridge somewhere and post them on Monday morning. Otherwise, they're going to sit, as Tom said, in reception or in the post office and really go off. So those are the boxes that we will send to the bee advisors, bee health advisors, because we want one person in each association or 2 people to take responsibility for these. We just can't send them out to every member. We only want them used when you think you've got a problem. We don't want everybody sending, oh, I think I should send a sample of brood off to the lab. That's not what this is about. This is about trying to find out, if you've got unhealthy bees. So that's the boxes that we will send, a number of them, to your bee health advisor. Okay, and Nicola, the next one is we're going to include then in that the vial. So the boxes can be labelled and put in the post, and the vial can go into an envelope. And what we're looking for is if you can take out of the comb very carefully with a pair of tweezers 3 or 4 of what larvae does not look healthy and put it into that vial, put it in the post. Again, make sure you put inside that envelope where it came from and who you are and your contact details so that they can come back to you and tell you, because it is all confidential. So on the bottom of that, I put, remember, healthy larvae looks pearly white, C-shaped and clear segmentation. If anything looks nothing like that, then you really should be trying to get that tested. And it's a good time to do it. And this is where it needs to be posted to. And that's Ivan Forsyth. And that's also on the presentation that we'll send out to the bee health advisors. And what we'd really like to do is have terms of reference for those bee health advisors. And we want that group. So if you can send Nicola, our secretary, the name or names of who you would like to be and who would volunteer to be your bee health advisors as a group, we want them to put together their terms of reference that they feel this is what we can do for the association, this is what we can't do, and this is what we will do. So as soon as Nicola's got that for every association, if we don't get all 16, then I'll probably give them a phone call as well and say, look, we need one person because I don't want to be sending out 1,400 samples. We couldn't afford to do that. But these samples should go out to the bee health advisor to control and give everybody an opportunity while we lobby to continue to get our bee inspectors back that we have had. And there is a responsibility of the government to provide that. I hope that answers. If there's any questions on what I've just said, please put them in the Q&A, or you can give me a call or send us an email. What we're going to do from tonight's presentation is Gary McConnell is going to edit it for us, and we'll put it up onto a YouTube channel so that you can have that. And the presentations, again, will go out to the bee health advisors who will be able to use this presentation for you for the future. And we think you should be doing minimum bee disease inspections, not looking for the queen, not looking for queen cells, in the springtime and in the autumn time as a minimum. I'd like to thank you all very much indeed, and it was lovely to have such a spread of people. We are also going to put together a Facebook on the Asian Hornet, along with the Irish Beekeepers Association, and that will be administrated because Asian Hornet doesn't respect borders, and we need to work together to make sure we keep all of our bees healthy from any notifiable disease and pests. Thank you all very much for joining us this evening. Feedback welcome after tonight, and good night.